video, I'm going to be showing you the truth between Jesus, Christianity, and the law of attraction in general. I'm going to show you some things that are commonly overlooked and how we can start to live in a very similar way through our own thoughts, through our own feelings, and through our own actions. Welcome back to another video. My name is Aaron and I help people expand their consciousness. Now in this video, I'm going to be going deep with you, understanding something that's a lot more controversial. Now let me first off say that I am coming at this from this point of observation. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm not saying that Christianity is bad. I'm not saying any of these things. I'm saying that many times things over the ages can be somewhat misinterpreted. And by that, what I mean is some of the teachings of Jesus and of what we see in the Bible has been, in a way, a little bit misinterpreted, from some things being literal, some things being actual. But the key of this is to understand the teaching and the underlying message and how we can apply it in our own life. So the first thing I want to talk about is Jesus in general and the way that I see the process. Now let me first off say that when I was growing up, I went to church every Sunday, that I was considered a Christian, and I went to church every Sunday up until I was about 16 years old. And eventually I just stopped going because my dad divorced my ex-stepmom. I kind of was forced to go, and even though I, kind of believed in a lot of it, I'm not saying I don't believe in it now, I'm saying my viewpoint has changed to understanding more of the levels of consciousness that Jesus obtained, understanding enlightenment in a deeper level, and understanding how we can apply that in our own lives. So a lot of the things I'm going to tell you in this video can be something you apply in your life versus just something that we read in a book. Now, one of those things was understanding that the energy that exists within Jesus, that person that we call Jesus, first off, I believe that Jesus is somebody that embodied what is called Christ consciousness. Now, Christ consciousness is more of a level of consciousness than anything else. And a lot of his teachings were digested by people, were interpreted by people that were at a certain consciousness level. That's how they interpreted him. So if that makes sense. So he was at a certain consciousness level, and then people that were under that looked to him and saw him as a God, when in reality he was telling the people, saying, look, everything that I can do, you can do as well, and you can do even greater things. But you see, a lot of the teachings don't really even include that. I remember one time I was at the gym and I was in the sauna actually, and there was a guy there that was talking to me, and he was talking to me, was it after Easter or something like that? And he was really trying to sell me on Christianity. And I wasn't even denying what he was saying. I just wasn't necessarily accentuating and like wanting to know more of the gospel Bible verses and stuff. But he kept telling it to me. And the way that I explained it to him was that, what about the quote of everything that is within me is also within you? Kind of talking about it more from Christ consciousness. And it's often very overlooked. He was like, oh yeah. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, he couldn't really understand it because we've been so conditioned to believe in the interpretation that the divineness is outside of ourselves. We've spent so much time of our lives looking outside for that which we call God, when God is within us. God is a level of consciousness that when we start to tap into, can change our whole lives. Now, let me say that it's a level of consciousness that's within us, but I'm not saying to be identified with the ego. I'm not saying that we are gods in the sense that we rule other people or animals or any of that. I'm saying that we can embody Christ consciousness, and Christ consciousness doesn't have control. Christ consciousness isn't identified with things. Christ consciousness is more about understanding unity, that we are all connected, and that we do create our own reality from our thoughts. So this is more about the awareness of what Christ consciousness is, and knowing that back in the day, that when it was translated into word, what happened is they were understanding it. Those people were understanding it from their level of consciousness of something that was of a higher vibrational nature. So in the same way, there are ways that we can apply the teachings of Jesus. but it has more so to do with thinking about it in terms of consciousness. Now, there's another part in the book of Revelations where it talks about the second coming of Christ. It's a prophesized type time in the planet of when he is coming back. However, once again, this is an interpretation of more of an energy flow of something that is actually, I believe, happening right now. Right now, more and more people are waking up to who they are, and more people are starting to understand and have a certain level of spiritual awakening, understanding that that energy that we thought for a long time conditioned is outside of ourselves is actually within us. And that second coming of Christ is something that is happening right now. It's the second coming of Christ consciousness. We like to think in very literal terms. We like to think that it's an actual person that is coming back. But what it really is it's a Christ consciousness. It's a level of consciousness that we are all starting to tap more into, that as we tap more into this divine presence, this divine level where we understand we are all connected, we are all one, that's where everything can begin to change. You see, that's something that Jesus knew. Jesus knew that everybody is connected. And that's why he put out so much good to other people, because he understood that correlation. And now more than ever, more and more people are waking up to understanding that we are all connected. We're learning more about quantum physics. We're learning more about maybe some of the more intellectual type ideas. But this is something that he knew, and this is something that we also can tap into. So this is really about awareness more so than anything else. And when we start to, if you were to have a spiritual awakening and then go and read the Bible again, maybe you were brought up like me, you were brought up Christian, or maybe you were brought up Catholic, or whatever religion you were brought up in. Maybe you go read whatever spiritual text that you had after a spiritual awakening, you becoming more aware that you do create your own reality, that a lot of things in life are meant in a very metaphorical type way. Then what you do is you read it and it has whole new depth of meaning, because you see things that you didn't see before. You understand it from a higher point of view. Not higher like patriarchal, like lower and higher, but higher, just more expanded awareness. And in the same way, one thing that Jesus also knew was the correlation between thoughts, actions, and what we experience in our life. That's something we can begin to understand as well. The kingdom of heaven is within. It's within us. That's something that we can create with our thoughts, with our emotions, with how we see ourselves, with how we relate to the world. That's something we can create right now. That second coming, that whole, a lot of the teachings in Revelations, that's happening right now, but not in the end of the world. It's the end of an old paradigm that no longer works. And it's the transmutation into a higher level of consciousness. And sometimes with that higher level of consciousness, the old systems have to break down. And that's what's happening. And more people are waking up than ever before. You can tell because channels like this have grown very quickly. More and more people, I meet, and not only have I met more and more people because of maybe what I'm doing, but I have people that back in the day you wouldn't think of necessarily of going through this type of information, or that normally would have looked at this in a different mentality. And now they are waking up to it and they're like, whoa, I watch your videos, I'm learning about this, I'm learning about this. And I'm like, wow, it really is a new era right now. This is, I believe, one of the best times to ever be alive on the planet. And it's because of this Christ consciousness that exists within everybody. We are all a piece of the puzzle. A lot of times we like to think that we want to, in a way, worship the puzzle, not knowing we are a piece of the puzzle. So we externalize our power, we go out, and we are constantly putting our energy into everything else. You know, one thing that always confused me growing up was, I remember I was like 12 years old and I was at church, it was like Sunday school, and I was learning that God, seemed to be a very demanding type person. It was like, even though we know it's more of an energy than a person, it's like has jealous tendencies to where you can't do this, you can't do that. Like you see, like we put it in terms of how we can relate to it. So back in the day we said God was a he, whereas if something is that expanded, it wouldn't have a polarization of he. It's just the way that we were dominated in the energy, so we associate it with it being a he. But the idea, nonetheless, is that we put our power into that itself, and we saw it as something that had a lot of the lower emotions as well. We saw God as being jealous, telling you can't do this, all of these very strict rules, when in reality, we have our own code, we have our own way. We know that you don't kill other people. We know a lot of these things at a deeper level if we go down and we start to tap into our heart center. And we don't necessarily need to be told those kind of things. But what I mean by this is I couldn't understand why somebody that is so high up there in what we consider to be heaven would have such lower emotions of jealous, of anger. I just couldn't understand it. But then later on, I realized that that was an interpretation from people that were at a different level of consciousness or lower level of consciousness. In reality, I believe that God, what we call God, is an energy source that we are all connected to. It is non-judgmental. It is completely accepting. And that what we can begin to do is tap into that by understanding and recognizing the Christ consciousness within all of us. I believe the Christ consciousness happens when we raise our vibration, when we raise our level of consciousness. And that when we do that, we start to see that we are all connected, that everything we experience in our life is a reflection of us, and that we can't really hate other people, we can't really put out bad, because that other person we're doing bad to is actually another version of us. Not the ego us, but the energy underneath the ego. We are much more vast than we priorly thought. And I think that right now on the planet is the most potent time to ever be alive. I believe more people are waking up than ever before. I believe that this, what we call in the Bible, what we call normally in the scriptures as the second coming of Christ, is actually a second coming of Christ consciousness. And it's something that we are all connected to if we choose to. And the more we embody that energy, the more we will transform our life. So another part of this is raising our vibration. That's how we really raise our consciousness in a very powerful way. If you want a free guided meditation that will show you exactly how to raise your vibrational set point, I've created one that you can download in the top of the description box below. It will help you to raise your vibrational set point. If you're at maybe a 3 or 4 out of 10, 1 out of 10 scale, 10 feeling the best, it will help you to get to a 7 or an 8, maybe even higher. That's what it did for me. That's why I wanted to put that into something that you can download as well. Now, another thing I'll be doing is more live Q&As on Instagram. So if you want to interact with me, if you want to ask me questions, you can go ahead and follow me there as well. I'm going to go ahead and link it right over here for you guys. And other than that, as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to like this video if you guys liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Also, hit that little notification here so that you can see the daily vids that I do. And other than that, as always, peace, much love, and namaste.